I spent 3 years hunting a Bigfoot for revenge. I blamed it for killing my best friend. I tracked it. I found it. I tried to shoot it. But then it did something that shattered everything I believed. It took me to my friend's grave. A grave it had made, with flowers, with a burial, with honor. The Bigfoot didn't kill my friend. A grizzly bear did. And when I was dying in the snow, the creature I tried to murder carried me to safety and showed me the truth. If you think you know what Bigfoot is, if you think they're monsters, hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to tell you will change everything you believe about these creatures. This is my story, and I have the trail camera photos to prove it. I need to tell you about something that happened to me last winter. Something that changed everything I thought I knew about these mountains. Most people who hear this story think I'm crazy, but I don't care anymore. I have proof. My trail camera captured images of a Bigfoot just hours before it attacked my cabin. 3 years ago, I lost my best friend in these woods. We'd been hunting partners since we were teenagers. Spent every fall tracking deer and elk through the backwoods of northern Idaho. He was the kind of guy who could read the forest like other people read books. He knew every animal track, every bird call, every sign that something was out there watching. That October, he went out on a solo trip, said he wanted to scout a new area he'd heard about way back in the wilderness where hardly anyone ever went. He was supposed to be back in 5 days. On day 6, I reported him missing. Search and rescue went out immediately, but the area was massive and the terrain was brutal. They found his camp on day 3 of the search. His backpack was torn open, contents scattered everywhere. His tent was shredded. The sleeping bag looked like something had ripped it apart with claws. But there was no body, no blood trail, nothing except his gear and something else that made my skin crawl when the police showed me the photos. Footprints, massive footprints all around the campsite. The police measured them at 18 inches long and 7 inches wide. They were pressed deep into the mud, suggesting whatever made them weighed several hundred pounds. The prints showed 5 toes, but they weren't bear tracks. They were too human-like in shape with a distinct arch and separated toes. The official report said bear attack. They claimed a grizzly must have dragged his body away and that the footprints were just distorted, bear tracks in soft mud. They closed the case after 2 weeks. No body recovered. Case closed. Move on. But I couldn't move on. Those weren't bear tracks. And anyone who spent real time in the woods knew it. I made copies of every photo from the investigation. I studied those prints for months. I researched every piece of information I could find about unexplained disappearances in the area. And I came to a conclusion that most people would call insane. A Bigfoot killed my friend. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I spent months trying to convince myself I was wrong. But the more I researched, the more everything pointed to the same conclusion. There were dozens of reports from that area over the years. Hikers seeing massive hairy figures in the trees, hunters finding enormous footprints, strange howls in the night that didn't match any known animal, camp raids where food was taken but tents were left standing, missing persons cases that were never solved. Something was out there and it had killed my friend. I spent the next 2 years preparing. I wasn't going to wander into the woods with a rifle and hope to get lucky. If there really was a Bigfoot out there, and if it had killed my friend, then I needed to be smart about this. I needed to draw it out, document it, and then end it. Those 2 years were consumed with preparation. I read everything I could find about Bigfoot sightings in the Pacific Northwest. I studied tracking techniques used by indigenous hunters. I learned wilderness survival skills that would let me stay out in the backcountry for months at a time. I practiced with my rifle until I could hit a target from 300 yards in any weather condition. I quit my job as a construction foreman. My coworkers thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. I sold my truck and most of my possessions to fund the expedition. I bought the best outdoor gear money could buy. A rifle specifically designed for large game. Motion sensor cameras that could work in sub-zero temperatures. Enough freeze-dried food to last 6 months. A satellite phone for emergencies. Everything I might need to survive a winter in the wilderness. My family thought I'd lost my mind. My ex-wife called me obsessed. She was probably right. I couldn't stop thinking about those footprints. Couldn't stop seeing my friend's shredded tent in my nightmares. Couldn't stop feeling the weight of knowing that something out there had taken him and gotten away with it. I made copies of the police photos and pinned them to my apartment wall. I marked every Bigfoot sighting in the area. On a topographic map, I drew circles showing the most likely territory based on food sources, water access, and remoteness. I calculated patrol routes and behavioral patterns. I was treating this like a military operation because that's what it was, a war against an enemy that had killed someone I love. I carried his photo with me everywhere, kept it in my shirt pocket, right over my heart. Every morning I'd look at it and remember why I was doing this. He deserved justice. He deserved someone to actually find out what happened instead of accepting the easy explanation. I studied everything I could find about Bigfoot behavior. The reports all suggested these things were smart, careful, and very good at staying hidden. They seemed to be most active in winter when there were fewer people in the woods. They were attracted to food sources and would investigate human camps, especially isolated ones. And they were territorial, which meant if I set up in the right spot, eventually one would come to investigate. I found the perfect location through old topographic maps and land records. There was an abandoned cabin about 12 miles from where my friend disappeared. It had been built by a trapper back in the 82nds and was left to rot after he died. The cabin was in terrible shape, but the structure was still sound. More importantly, it was right in the heart of Bigfoot territory based on the sighting reports I'd compiled. I hiked in during late fall to repair the cabin, fixed the roof, replaced the door, boarded up the worst of the broken windows. I brought in supplies for a long stay and set up my equipment. I had a hunting rifle, plenty of ammunition, a backup pistol, emergency supplies, and most importantly, 6 trail cameras with motion detection. I placed those cameras in a wide perimeter around the cabin, about 50 yards in every direction. They were the good kind, militaria with infrared sensors that could detect heat signatures from over 100 feet away. The cameras would take a photo every time something moved past them, day or night. If a Bigfoot came near the cabin, I'd have proof. My plan was simple. Spend the winter in that cabin. Let the Bigfoot get curious about the smoke from my fire, the smell of food cooking. Eventually, it would investigate. The cameras would alert me. I'd grab my rifle and I'd finally get the confrontation I'd been waiting 3 years for. I moved into the cabin in mid-December, right before the first major snowstorm was supposed to hit. The weather reports were calling for the worst winter in decades, which was perfect. Fewer people would be stupid enough to venture into the back country, meaning less competition for the Bigfoot's attention. The first 2 weeks were uneventful. I fell into a routine. Wake up at dawn, check the trail cameras, chop wood, cook food, keep the fire going. The cold was intense, dropping to below zero most nights. Snow piled up around the cabin until the drifts were higher than the windows. I was completely cut off from the outside world, which was exactly what I wanted. The isolation got to me faster than I expected. I'd spent time alone in the woods before, but never like this. Never in the dead of winter, with no way out and no contact with other humans. The silence was depressive. The only sounds were the crack of the fire, the whistle of wind through the trees, and the occasional groan of settling snow on the cabin roof. I kept busy to avoid going crazy. I reinforced the cabin walls with extra boards. I organized my supplies obsessively. I cleaned and recaned my rifle. I wrote in a journal, documenting every day, every observation, every thought. Most entries were mundane temperature writings, wildlife sightings, inventory checks. But between the practical notes, I'd write about my friend, about the plans we'd made to go hunting in Alaska, about the time he saved my life during a flash flood, about how much I missed him. At night, I'd sit by the fire and study the police photos for the 100th time. I'd trace those footprints so many times I could see them when I closed my eyes. 18 inches long, 7 inches wide. A stride length that suggested something over 7 feet tall. The depth of the impression suggested a weight of at least 600 pounds. Whatever made those tracks was massive, powerful, and had been right there at my friend's camp. The trail cameras caught plenty of wildlife. Deer, elk, a few foxes, several ravens, but nothing unusual, nothing that made my heart race. Every day, I'd collect the memory cards, review the footage on my laptop, and feel that familiar disappointment. Where was it? Why wasn't it coming? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the Bigfoot had moved on. Or maybe there never was one in the first place. Maybe my friend really had been killed by a bear, and I was out here freezing in an abandoned cabin for nothing. Those thoughts crept in during the long nights when the wind howled and the cabin walls creaked. But I'd pull out that photo from my pocket and stare at it in the firelight. My friend's face smiling back at me from better times. No, I wasn't wrong. Something took him, Something was out there. I just had to be patient. Week 3 brought a change. I started noticing things around the cabin, small things that could have been coincidence but felt deliberate. A stack of firewood I'd piled up was scattered one morning. A deer carcass I'd hung from a tree to freeze was gone. But there were no tracks in the fresh snow. Strange sounds in the forest at night, like wood knocking against wood echoing through the trees. The wood knocking was particularly unsettling. I'd heard about it in Bigfoot reports, how they supposedly communicate by striking trees with branches or rocks. The sound would start far off, maybe half a mile away. 3 deliberate knocks evenly spaced. Then silence for a minute, then another 3 knocks closer this time. It would continue like that for hours, the source slowly circling the cabin, never quite revealing itself. I grab my rifle and flashlight and go outside, scanning the treeing. Nothing, just darkness and falling snow and the feeling of being watched. The knocking would stop the moment I opened the door, as if whatever was making it knew I was listening, as if it was testing me, seeing how I'd react. Other signs appeared. Massive handprints on the cabin windows smeared in the frost. Tracks that would appear in the morning circling the cabin in a wide perimeter just beyond my camera range. Rocks stacked in strange formations near the tree line, and always that feeling of being observed, of something out there studying me, the way I was trying to study it. I started leaving food out: apples, jerky, energy bars, anything that might draw the Bigfoot closer. The food would be gone by morning, but still no images on the cameras. Whatever was taking it knew exactly where each camera was positioned and was avoiding them with surgical precision. This thing wasn't just smart. It was showing me that it understood technology, understood surveillance, and could outsmart my equipment whenever it wanted. I checked the trail cameras obsessively. Nothing. Whatever was doing this knew where the cameras were and was avoiding them. That realization sent ice through my veins colder than the winter air. This thing was smart. It was watching me and it knew about the cameras. I started sleeping with the rifle next to my cot. Every creak, every sound made me bolt upright, heart pounding. The waiting was worse than I'd imagined. I could feel eyes on me whenever I stepped outside. The forest felt different now, charged with something dangerous and aware. The blizzard hit on January 7th. I remember the date because I'd been marking days on the cabin wall with a piece of charcoal. The Weather Service had been tracking the storm for days, calling it a once-in-a-generation winter event. Wind speeds over 60 miles per hour, temperature dropping to -30, snowfall measured in feet, not inches. I spent the morning of the 7th securing everything outside, brought in extra firewood, tied down anything that could blow away, made sure the cabin was sealed tight. By noon, the wind was already howling. By 2:00 inches the afternoon, I couldn't see more than a few feet beyond the windows. The world had turned into a swirling white void. I sat by the fire, feeding logs into the stove to keep the cabin warm. The temperature inside was probably 40 degrees, which felt tropical compared to outside. I was working on some gear maintenance, cleaning my rifle for the 100th time when my laptop chirped. The trail cameras had wireless connectivity within a limited range. If they detected motion, they'd ping my laptop immediately instead of waiting for me to collect the cards. I'd set up the system specifically for moments like this when going outside would be difficult or dangerous. The alert was from camera 3, positioned on the north side of the cabin. I pulled up the image feed with shaking hands. At first, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. The photo was taken through heavy falling snow, everything obscured by the storm. But there, standing between 2 trees, was a dark shape, large, humanoid, watching. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering in my chest. The shape was unmistakable even through the blizzard conditions. It stood upright on 2 legs, but it was massive, towering over the surrounding vegetation. The proportions were all wrong for a human. The arms hung too long, nearly to its knees. The shoulders were impossibly broad, suggesting enormous strength. And the head, that conical skull shape I'd read about in so many Bigfoot reports. My hands trembled as I zoomed in on the image. I cranked up the brightness and contrast, trying to see more detail. The Bigfoot was looking directly at the camera. Its eyes caught the flash, reflecting back like an animal's eyes do at night. But there was something in that gaze that was distinctly unanimal intelligence. Awareness, purpose, another ping. Camera 5 on the east side. I pulled up that image. The Bigfoot had moved. It was closer now, circling the cabin. This photo was clearer, showing more detail. Dark fur matted with snow. arms that hung past its knees. Eyes that reflected the cameras flashed like a deer's, but with an intelligence behind them that made my hands sweat despite the cold. A third ping, camera 2, then camera 6. The Bigfoot was moving around the perimeter, and it was moving fast. With each photo, it was closer to the cabin. In the most recent image, I could make out individual strands of fur, see the way its breath fogged in the freezing air, see the size of its hands with their thick fingers. This was it. This was what I'd been waiting for. 3 years of planning, months of preparation, weeks of waiting in this frozen hell. The Bigfoot was here, right outside my cabin. The thing that killed my friend was within my reach. I grabbed my rifle and checked the magazine, fully loaded. I had extra ammunition in my jacket pockets. I pulled on my heavy coat, my boots, my gloves. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely tie the laces. This wasn't fear. This was rage, pure burning rage that I'd been carrying for 3 years. I touched the photo in my pocket one more time. Then I opened the cabin door and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit me like a physical force. The wind was so strong it nearly knocked me over. Snow stung my face like needles. I could barely see 5 feet in front of me. This was insane. Going out in a blizzard like this was suicide. But I didn't care. Logic didn't matter anymore. The Bigfoot was out here and I was going to find it. The temperature had dropped to at least 20 below zero, maybe colder with the wind chill. Each breath felt like ice in my lungs. My eyes watered constantly, the tears freezing on my cheeks almost instantly. The wind howled so loud I couldn't hear my own thoughts. Snow came at me horizontally, billions of tiny knives cutting into any exposed skin. I pulled my hood tight and bent forward into the wind, forcing myself to move. The snow was already knee-deep in places deeper where it had drifted. Each step was a battle. My boots punched through the crust, sinking into powder underneath. My legs burned with the effort of pulling them free. Taking another step, sinking again. I knew where camera 2 was. I'd walked that path 100 times. But in the storm, everything looked different. Landmarks disappeared. Trees became indistinct shadows. Distance became impossible to judge. I counted my steps, trying to navigate by dead reckoning, hoping I was heading in the right direction. My hands were already going numb despite the insulated gloves. I had to keep switching the rifle from hand to hand, tucking one into my armpit to warm it while the other gripped the weapon. The metal of the rifle was so cold it burned to touch even through the gloves. Ice was forming on my beard, on my eyebrows, anywhere moisture met air. I found the tree where I'd mounted the camera. The camera was gone, ripped right off the tree, the mounting bracket bent and broken. I looked around frantically, searching the snow at the base of the tree. There the camera was smashed. The plastic casing cracked, the lens shattered. Something had destroyed it with its bare hands. I picked up the pieces, my hands shaking. The metal mounting bracket was twisted like foil. The screws that had held it to the tree were sheared off. Whatever did this had strength beyond anything I could imagine. I looked at the tree trunk and saw deep scratches in the bark. 4 parallel gouges that could have been made by claws or thick fingers. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the cold. The Bigfoot had done this. It had seen the camera flash, had walked right up to it, and had torn it apart. And it had done so during the worst blizzard in decades in conditions that had me barely able to stand. While I was huddled in my cabin, this thing was out here moving through the storm like it was a light breeze. I moved to the next camera location, pushing through snow that was now thigh-deep. The wind was getting worse, if that was possible. I could feel my core temperature dropping. My toes were numb. My fingers barely responded when I tried to move them. But I had to know. I had to see if all the cameras were destroyed or just this one. Camera 3 destroyed. The entire unit torn from the tree and thrown 20 feet away. I found it half buried in the snow, crushed like someone had stepped on it. Camera 5, same thing. Camera 6. Every single one, systematically destroyed. The Bigfoot had made a circuit around my cabin, finding and destroying every camera I'd placed. It had done in one night what had taken me days to set up. I stood there in the howling wind trying to process what this meant. The Bigfoot wasn't just smart, it was strategic. It had waited until the worst possible conditions when I'd be trapped inside, unable to respond. Then it had methodically eliminated my surveillance system. It knew what the cameras were for. It knew they were a threat, and it had dealt with that threat, efficiently and completely. By the time I checked the last camera, I'd been outside for over an hour. I was soaked with snow, frozen to my core, and no closer to finding the Bigfoot. The storm was getting worse, not better. Visibility was down to almost nothing. I couldn't feel my feet anymore. I couldn't feel my hands. The rifle was so cold it burned to touch, even through my gloves. I had to turn back. Every survival instinct I had was screaming at me to get inside. I was at serious risk of frostbite or hypothermia. If I stayed out here much longer, I wouldn't make it back to the cabin at all. The decision felt like failure. I'd come out here to hunt the Bigfoot, and instead I was retreating, beaten by the weather and outmaneuvered by my quarry. But pride wouldn't keep me alive. I was already in danger. My hands wouldn't close properly. My feet felt like blocks of ice. My face was completely numb. I needed shelter, warmth, and I needed them soon. I turned around and started trudging back. The wind was at my back now, pushing me forward, which should have made things easier. But I was exhausted. Every step took tremendous effort. The cold had sapped my strength. My muscles felt like rubber. Several times I fell, sinking into the snow, and it took everything I had to get back up. I kept my head down, focused on putting one foot in front of the other. I was following my tracks back, but they were filling in fast. In another hour, they'd be gone completely. Erased by the storm, I had to move faster, had to get back before I lost the trail. But I couldn't move faster. I was already at my limit. My mind started playing tricks on me. I'd see shapes in the swirling snow that looked like the cabin, only to get closer and realize it was just a tree or a rock. I'd think I heard sounds behind me, footsteps matching my pace, but when I turned around, there was nothing but white. The hypothermia was setting in. My thoughts were getting fuzzy. I had to stay focused, had to keep moving. When I finally saw the dark shape of the cabin emerging from the white, relief flooded through me. I was almost there. Just a few more yards, I'd get inside, get warm, and figure out my next move. The Bigfoot had won this round, but there would be others. I'd find another way. Then I got close enough to see clearly, and my blood turned to ice. The cabin door was hanging off its hinges. The windows I'd carefully boarded up were smashed inward. Through the broken doorway, I could see my supplies scattered everywhere. My gear torn apart. My cot flipped over. The Bigfoot hadn't just visited the cabin. It had destroyed it, and it was still there. I could hear it, moving inside. Heavy footsteps, the crash of furniture being thrown, a low guttural sound that might have been breathing or growling. The Bigfoot was inside my cabin, tearing everything apart. I stood there in the snow, rifle raised, staring at my destroyed cabin. This was the moment. This was what I'd come for. The Bigfoot was right there, maybe 20 feet away. All I had to do was walk through that broken door and shoot it. But I didn't move. Something kept me frozen in place. And it wasn't the cold. It was the realization that I was no longer the hunter. I was prey. The Bigfoot had led me away from the cabin, destroyed my cameras, made me waste time and energy searching for it in a blizzard. And while I was out there freezing and getting weaker, it had circled back and destroyed my shelter. This thing was smart, smarter than I'd given it credit for. It had outmaneuvered me completely. A shadow moved in the cabin, huge and dark. Then the Bigfoot emerged through the broken doorway. It stood there, framed by the wreckage at least 8 feet tall. Snow clung to its dark brown fur. Its breath came out in great foggy plumes, and it was looking right at me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I could see it clearly now, even through the storm. The massive shoulders, the long arms, the face that was neither human nor ape, but something in between. Its eyes reflected what little light there was, glowing faintly in the gloom. I raised the rifle to my shoulder. My hands were shaking from cold and adrenaline, but I managed to get the Bigfoot in my sights. Center mass, just like I'd practiced 1,000 times. My finger found the trigger. The Bigfoot didn't run. It didn't charge. It just stood there watching me, waiting. I should have shot. This was my chance. This was what I'd spent 3 years planning for. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way it was looking at me with what seemed like curiosity rather than aggression. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the hypothermia starting to set in, making my thoughts fuzzy. Then the Bigfoot moved, not toward me, but around me, circling to the side. I tried to track it with the rifle, but my movements were slow, clumsy. The Bigfoot moved through the deep snow like it weighed nothing, gliding around the cabin's perimeter. I heard other sounds now, more movement, more heavy footsteps. There was more than one. The realization hit me like a hammer. I'd been so focused on finding a Bigfoot singular that I'd never considered there might be multiple creatures. But now I could hear them all around me, moving through the trees, their dark shapes appearing and disappearing in the swirling snow. Panic flooded through me. I spun around trying to track all the shadows at once. I fired a shot at movement to my left. The rifle crack was deafening, but I had no idea if I'd hit anything. I fired again at a shape behind me, again at something moving through the trees. I was shooting at ghosts, burning through ammunition I couldn't afford to waste. But I couldn't stop. The terror had taken over, the primal fear of being surrounded by predators. I fired until the rifle clicked empty, the magazine spent. My hands fumbled for the spare magazine in my jacket pocket. The cold had made my fingers useless. I dropped the empty mag in the snow, tried to slot the new one in. It took 3 tries, precious seconds I didn't have. I finally got the magazine seated and looked up just in time to see the Bigfoot charging. It came out of the storm like a freight train, covering the distance between us in seconds. I tried to raise the rifle, but I was too slow. The Bigfoot was too fast, too close. It hit me hard enough to lift me off my feet. I felt the impact in my chest, in my ribs, driving the air from my lungs. Then I was flying backward, crashing into the snow. My head hit something solid, maybe a rock or a piece of firewood buried under the snow. The world went dark. I came to slowly consciousness, returning in fragments. Cold. I was so cold. My head throbbed with a deep, pulsing pain. My ribs ached with every breath. But I was alive. At first, I couldn't remember where I was or what had happened. My last clear memory was of standing outside the cabin, rifle raised, shooting at shadows in the storm. Then something had hit me, something big. The impact had lifted me off my feet, sent me flying, then darkness. How long had I been unconscious? Minutes? Hours? Days? I had no way of knowing. The light filtering into the cave was dim and gray, giving no indication of the time. My body felt stiff, like I'd been lying in one position for a long time. Snow had melted and refrozen in my hair, on my clothes. My gear was gone. No rifle, no backpack, just me, hurt and helpless in a place I didn't recognize. I tried to move and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through my chest and shoulder like electricity. Something was definitely wrong with my left arm. Tongue at my side, useless, screaming with pain when I tried to lift it. Dislocated shoulder, maybe, or broken collarbone. Either way, I wasn't going to be using that arm anytime soon. My ribs hurt too. A deep ache that got worse with every breath, cracked or broken, probably from the impact. My head pounded where I'd hit it. And when I touched the spot gingerly with my good hand, I felt dried blood in my hair. The inventory of injuries was bad. In my condition, in this weather, I should be dead. So, why wasn't I? I opened my eyes. I wasn't in the snow anymore. I was lying on cold stone in what looked like a cave. Dim light filtered in from somewhere, just enough to see by the walls were rough rock, the ceiling low. The air smelled of earth and something else, something musky and animal. Then I saw it. The Bigfoot was right there, less than 3 feet from my face, crouched down, watching me. Up close, it was even more massive than I'd realized. Its head was enormous with a pronounced brow ridge and a flat nose. Its eyes were dark, almost black, and they were staring right into mine. I should have been terrified. This thing could kill me with one hand. It probably already had killed my friend, but instead of fear, I felt rage. The same burning rage that had driven me out into the storm. This was the creature that had taken everything from me, and now it had me trapped, helpless in its cave. I tried to punch it. With my good arm, I swung as hard as I could at its face. The Bigfoot barely moved. It raised one massive hand and swatted my fist aside like I was a child. Then it pushed me, not hard, just a casual shove. The pain was incredible. My shoulders screamed. My ribs felt like they were on fire. I collapsed back onto the stone floor, gasping. Tears streamed down my face from the pain. All I could do was curse it. I lay there hurt and helpless, and I screamed every curse I knew at this thing. I called it a monster, a killer, a demon. I told it I hoped it rotted in hell. I told it I wished I'd killed it when I had the chance. The Bigfoot just sat there listening to my rage pour out. It didn't react. It didn't move. It just watched me with those dark, intelligent eyes. Finally, exhausted, I reached into my pocket with my good hand. The photo was still there, somehow miraculously intact. I pulled it out with shaking fingers and held it up to the Bigfoot's face. "This is who you killed," I told it through gritted teeth. "This was my friend. You took him from me? You monster. You murderer." The Bigfoot looked at the photo. Then it did something I didn't expect. It reached out with one enormous hand and took the photo from me. Its fingers were surprisingly gentle, careful not to damage the paper. It held the photo up close to its face, studying it. Then it made a sound, low, deep, almost mournful. It looked from the photo to me, then back to the photo, and then it nodded, a deliberate, unmistakable nod. It knew somehow this creature knew exactly who I was talking about. The Bigfoot tossed the photo back to me, then stood up. It was so tall it had to hunch over to fit in the cave. Made a gesture pointing toward the cave entrance, then back at me. The meaning was clear. Follow me. I didn't understand what was happening. This made no sense. Why would a Bigfoot want me to follow it? Was this some kind of trap? Was it going to take me somewhere to kill me? None of this made any sense at all. But what choice did I have? I was hurt, lost, and completely at this creature's mercy. If it wanted me dead, I'd already be dead. I struggled to my feet, cradling my injured arm against my chest. The Bigfoot waited patiently, then turned and walked toward the cave entrance. I followed. Outside the cave, the storm had passed. The world was buried in snow, everything white and clean. The sun was breaking through the clouds, and I realized it must be late afternoon. How long had I been unconscious? Hours? More. The light hurt my eyes after the dimness of the cave. I squinted against the glare of sun on snow, trying to get my bearings. We were high up on a mountainside. I could see the valley below, a vast expanse of white broken only by the dark shapes of evergreens. The cabin was nowhere in sight. How far had the Bigfoot carried me? The air was brutally cold, but still the wind finally died down. My breath came out in great plumes of fog. Each step broke through the crust of the snow with a crunch. The Bigfoot moved ahead of me, its long strides carrying it easily over terrain that I struggled through. It didn't look back, just assumed I would follow. The Bigfoot moved through the snow with ease, its long legs carrying it smoothly over drifts that I struggled through. It would pause occasionally to let me catch up, waiting patiently while I floundered forward. My injured arm made everything harder, and I was still weak from the cold and the fight. I used those pauses to study the creature. In daylight, I could see details I'd missed in the storm. Its fur was dark brown, almost black in places, and thick enough to shed snow without getting wet. The hair on its head was longer, hanging past its shoulders. Its face was surprisingly expressive with deep-set eyes that looked almost human. The mouth was hidden by the fur, but I could see the broad nose, the heavy brow ridge. I studied the Bigfoot as we walked. The way it moved was fascinating. It was bipedal, walking upright like a human, but with a rolling gait that spoke of immense strength. Its arms swung naturally at its sides, those massive hands occasionally reaching out to steady itself on a tree. Its head swiveled constantly, scanning the environment with the awareness of something that lived in the wild. Its feet left tracks in the snow. I couldn't help but compare them to the ones from the police photos. Same basic shape, same size, 18 inches long, 7 inches wide. These were the tracks that had been at my friend's campsite. This Bigfoot, or one like it, had been there when he died, and I was looking for weaknesses, looking for an opening. Even now, hurt and exhausted and completely at this thing's mercy. I was still thinking about killing it if I could get my hands on a rock, a branch, anything I could use as a weapon. If I could get behind it, maybe go for the back of the knees, bring it down. The hatred was still there, burning in my chest, still driving me even when it made no sense. That's how much hate I was carrying. That's how deep the need for revenge had become. This creature had saved my life, had brought me to shelter when I would have frozen to death in the storm, and I was still planning how to murder it. What did that say about me? What had I become in my obsession? We walked for about 10 minutes before the Bigfoot stopped. We were in a small clearing surrounded by old-growth pines. The Bigfoot pointed to a spot on the ground, then looked at me. I pushed forward through the snow, my legs burning with the effort. When I got close enough to see what it was pointing at, my breath caught in my throat. There was a cairn, a pile of carefully stacked rocks covered with snow. Around it were scattered objects, a camping mug, a torn piece of tent fabric, a hind boot, and withered flowers, brown and dead, but still recognizable. Someone had placed flowers here. This was a grave. I knew it instantly, and I knew whose grave it was. My legs gave out. I dropped to my knees in the snow. The pain in my ribs forgotten. The cold didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered except what I was seeing. The flowers, the carefully arranged items. Someone had buried my friend. Someone had marked his grave. Someone had mourned him. I dropped my knees in the snow. The pain in my shoulder didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered. I crawled forward, brushing snow away from the cairn with my good hand. My fingers were clumsy, numb from the cold. But I kept digging. I had to see, had to know for sure. There, partially hidden under a rock, was a piece of fabric. I pulled it out with shaking hands. It was a jacket, blue Gore-Tex, with a distinctive logo on the chest. I'd seen him wear this jacket 100 times. We joked about that logo, about how it made him look like a sponsored athlete, when really, he was just a weekend warrior. There, partially hidden under a rock, was a piece of fabric. I pulled it out. It was a jacket. My friend's jacket. I recognized the logo, the specific shade of blue. Tears blurred my vision. I clutched the jacket to my chest with my good arm, feeling the frozen fabric crackle. He'd been here. This was real. 3 years of not knowing. 3 years of the authorities telling his family there was no body to recover. And here he'd been all along. Buried properly, honored, protected. This was where he was buried. The Bigfoot had brought me to my friend's grave. But why? If the Bigfoot had killed him, why would it bury him? Why mark the grave? Why leave his possessions there? The rage was still there, burning hot in my chest. I spun around, ready to scream at the Bigfoot to demand answers. But it wasn't looking at me, it was looking at something else. Pointing at something, I followed its gaze, trying to see what had caught its attention. The Bigfoot's massive arm was extended, one thick finger pointing toward the edge of the clearing. Its posture was still, almost reverent. Whatever it was showing me, this was important. This was why it had brought me here. I followed its gaze. There, partially hidden under the snow near the edge of the clearing, was something else, something dark. I stumbled over to it, using my good arm to push through the snow. My legs were weak, unsteady. Every step sent jolts of pain through my ribs. But I had to see, had to understand what the Bigfoot was trying to show me. I waded through the snow, pushing it aside with my good arm, my injured shoulder protesting with every movement. They were claws, massive claws, each one as long as my hand. They were arranged in a circle, like some kind of memorial or warning. And they weren't Bigfoot claws. They were bear claws, grizzly bear claws. I knelt down and picked one up. It was thick, curved, wickedly sharp, even after all this time. The claw was yellowed with age, but still intact. I'd seen bear claws before, but never ones this size. This had come from a massive grizzly, probably 700 or 800 pounds, a true monster of the mountains. There were 4 claws total, arranged in a deliberate pattern around a flat stone. On the stone scratched into the surface were marks that might have been letters or symbols. I couldn't read them, didn't understand what they meant. But the message was clear enough. This was a trophy, evidence of a kill, proof of what had really happened here. I stared at them, my mind racing. The police had said bear attack. They'd been right about that much. But they'd assumed the bear had dragged away the body. They never found my friend because they assumed he'd been eaten, that there was nothing left to find. But he was here, buried properly, protected, and the bear claws were here too, arranged like a trophy or a testament. The Bigfoot hadn't killed my friend. A bear had killed my friend, and the Bigfoot had found him, fought off the bear, and buried what was left. It had protected his body. It had mourned him in its own way. The massive footprints the police found weren't from the killer. They were from the one who had tried to help. The one who had given my friend a burial when he had no one else. I'd been wrong. So, completely, utterly wrong. I looked back at the Kairan at my friend's final resting place. The Bigfoot had done this. This creature I'd hunted that I'd tried to kill had shown more humanity than I had. It had honored my friend when I'd been too consumed with revenge to even try. The tears came then, not from pain, but from shame and grief and the crushing weight of realization. I knelt there in the snow, crying like I hadn't cried since the day I learned my friend was missing. I'd carried 3 years of rage, and it had all been pointed at the wrong target. I don't know how long I stayed there. Long enough for my tears to freeze on my face. Long enough for the sun to drop lower in the sky. When I finally looked up, the Bigfoot was gone. vanished into the forest without a sound, leaving me alone with my grief and my friend's grave. I sat there for another 10 minutes, just staring at the Chiron. Part of me wanted to stay to keep vigil over my friend's grave, but I was hurt and the temperature was dropping fast. If I didn't get moving, I'd freeze to death out here. I used rocks and branches to mark the location as best I could with one working arm. I needed to be able to find this place again. My friend's family deserved to know where he was. They deserved proper closure, not the half answers the police had given them. I took one of the small rocks from the cairn and put it in my pocket along with the photo. Then I forced myself to stand and look around, trying to figure out where I was. The cabin was gone, destroyed by the storm and the Bigfoot. But I had my compass and I knew these mountains. If I headed south, I'd eventually hit the main trail system. The hike out took 2 days. My injured arm made everything harder, and I had to move slowly to conserve energy. I had no food, no water, except what I could melt from snow. I had no shelter, but I made it. Somehow, I made it. When I finally stumbled onto a maintained trail, I was hypothermic, dehydrated, and exhausted. A pair of hikers found me and called for help. I spent 3 days in the hospital recovering from frostbite, a dislocated shoulder, 2 broken ribs, and a mild concussion. I told the doctors I'd gotten caught in the storm and had to abandon my cabin. I didn't mention the Bigfoot. I didn't mention finding my friend's grave. Who would believe me? The trail cameras were destroyed. The cabin was buried under 10 feet of snow. I had no proof of anything that had happened, but I remembered the location. I'd marked it carefully in my mind, noted every landmark. As soon as I was able, once spring came and the snow melted, I went back with a GPS unit and proper recovery gear. It took me 3 days of searching, but I found the clearing. I found the cairn. I contacted my friend's family, told them I'd been hiking and stumbled upon remains that matched his description. I led the authorities to the site. They recovered what was left and confirmed it was him through dental records. His family finally got to lay him to rest properly in a cemetery near his hometown. They got closure. I never told them about the Bigfoot, never told them the truth about how I found the grave. How do you explain that? How do you tell a grieving family that their son was protected and honored by a creature that shouldn't exist? I kept the photos from the trail cameras. Before the Bigfoot destroyed them, I'd managed to upload the images to my laptop. Those photos are the only proof I have that any of this really happened. I'm sharing them here because people deserve to know the truth, not the sanitized version the authorities gave us, but what really happened in those woods. The first photo was taken by camera 3 on the north side of the cabin. You can see the Bigfoot standing between 2 pine trees, partially obscured by the falling snow. Even through the storm, the size is obvious. The proportions aren't human. The arms are too long, the shoulders too broad. And you can see it looking directly at the camera, aware it's being watched. The second photo is from camera 5 taken about 2 minutes later. The Bigfoot has moved closer. This shot is clearer, showing more detail. You can see the texture of the fur matted with snow. You can see the shape of the head, the heavy brow ridge. You can see the eyes reflecting the camera flash. This isn't a bear standing on its hind legs. This isn't a person in a costume. This is something else. I've had people tell me these photos are fake, that I doctored them somehow, that there's no such thing as Bigfoot. And I'm either lying or confused. But I know what I saw. I know what happened to me in those woods. And I know that somewhere in those mountains, there's a creature that showed more compassion than most humans I've ever met. I don't go into those mountains anymore. I'm done hunting, done tracking, done searching for things I don't understand. The experience changed me in ways I'm still processing. Years later, I spent 3 years consumed by hatred for something that didn't deserve it. 3 years, planning revenge against a creature that had done nothing wrong. The real monster wasn't the Bigfoot. It was me. I was so focused on finding something to blame, something to punish for my friend's death, that I couldn't see the truth. My friend died in a bear attack, a tragic accident. The Bigfoot tried to help. It protected his body and gave him a burial, and I tried to kill it for that. I think about that Bigfoot sometimes. Wonder if it's still out there. Wonder if it remembers me the way I remember it. Wonder if it understands that I was wrong, that I know now what really happened. I hope it does. I hope it knows that the human who tried to kill it eventually understood the truth. I carry that stone from the cairn with me everywhere now. It's my reminder of what hatred can do, how it can blind you to reality, It's my reminder that sometimes the things we fear the most aren't the real danger. Sometimes the real danger is the story we tell ourselves, the narrative we build to make sense of senseless tragedy. My friend's family asked me once how I found the grave. I told them I got lost in a storm and stumbled upon it. That's technically true. I did get lost. I did stumble upon it. I just left out the part about who led me there. Some truths are too strange to share. Some experiences change you in ways you can't explain to people who weren't there. This is mine. This is the story of how I hunted a Bigfoot for revenge and learned that I was hunting the wrong thing all along. The Bigfoot didn't kill my friend. The Bigfoot saved him from being lost forever. And when I was hurt and dying in the snow, it saved me too. It could have let me freeze to death. It could have killed me after I tried to shoot it. Instead, it brought me to shelter, waited for me to wake up, and showed me the truth I'd been too blind to see. That's more mercy than I would have shown, more grace than I deserved, and that's something I have to live with for the rest of my life. So, here's my advice to anyone reading this. If you go into the deep woods, if you venture into places where humans rarely tread, remember that you're not alone. There are things out there we don't understand. Things that have their own lives, their own purposes, their own way of being in the world, and maybe, just maybe, those things aren't the monsters we make them out to be. Maybe the real monsters are the ones we create in our own minds. The stories we tell ourselves to make sense of a world that doesn't always make sense. The narratives we build to avoid facing uncomfortable truths. I was wrong about the Bigfoot. I was wrong about everything. And I'm grateful in a strange way that I lived long enough to realize it. Not everyone gets that chance. Not everyone gets to face their mistakes and understand where they went wrong. The Bigfoot gave me that gift. Whether it meant to or not, it gave me the truth. And the truth, as painful as it was, set me free from 3 years of hatred and grief. So, yes, I have photos of a Bigfoot. Yes, I encountered one up close. Yes, I know they're real. But more importantly, I know they're not what we think they are. They're not monsters, they're not killers. They're just trying to survive in a world that's getting smaller every day, trying to stay hidden from creatures like me who would hunt them down for the wrong reasons. If you see one, leave it alone. Don't try to prove it exists. Don't try to hunt it. Don't try to capture it or study it. Just let it be. Let it live its life in peace. That's what I should have done. That's what I wish I'd done from the start. My friend is at rest now. His family has closure. And I have the truth. That's all I can ask for. That's all any of us can ask for. The Bigfoot is still out there somewhere, still living in those mountains, still protecting its territory. And I hope it stays hidden. I hope it stays safe. I hope no one else makes the mistake I made, because the world needs more creatures that show compassion to their enemies. More beings that protect the helpless and honor the dead. More examples of mercy and action. The Bigfoot taught me that a creature that shouldn't exist according to science and rational thinking taught me more about humanity than most humans ever have. And that's something I'll carry with me, along with that stone from my friend's Karen, for the rest of my life. This is my story. This is what happened to me in those mountains during the worst winter storm in 20 years. Believe it or don't, judge me or don't, but know that it's true, every word of it. And if you ever find yourself in the deep woods, in places where the trees grow thick and the silence is absolute, remember this story. Remember that you're not alone. And remember that the things you fear might not be the things you should fear at all. Stay safe out there, respect the wilderness. And if you see something impossible, something that shouldn't exist, maybe just let it go. Let it disappear back into the forest. Some mysteries don't need to be solved. Some creatures deserve to remain hidden. The Bigfoot earned that right when it buried my friend. It earned that right when it saved my life. And I owe it at least this much to tell the truth about what happened and ask others to leave it in peace. That's all I have to say. That's my story. Make of it what you will. That's my story. 3 years of hunting the wrong enemy, a creature that showed me more mercy than I showed it, and a truth that changed everything I believed. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been completely wrong about something? Ever blamed the wrong person or thing for something terrible? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story changed how you think about Bigfoot, if it made you realize they might not be monsters after all, hit that subscribe button. Next week, I'm sharing something even more powerful. A park ranger who discovered something in the wilderness that the government ordered him to never speak about. Until now. You don't want to miss it. Until next time, stay safe out there. And remember, sometimes the real monsters aren't in the forest. They're the stories we tell ourselves. For more incredible encounters, watch this video next.